Hello, everybody, and welcome to Books in Hindsight. I'm your host, author Matthew Hines. Today we have an amazing guest. We have James Gilliland from the ECETI Ranch. James is coming on the show to talk about his books all the way from Becoming Gods to Anunnaki Return. It's going to be an amazing show, so I encourage you to please stick around. And before we start the show, I just want to remind everybody that how Books in Hindsight makes money and supports our authors is we have affiliate links on Books in Hindsight and at Heinessight.com, where you can go click on those links and buy these authors' books. That way I make a little bit of money and our authors make a little bit of money. So that is how it works. And also, we would just like to encourage you to subscribe wherever you listen, whether it's Spotify, whether it's iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, or even iHeartRadio. Of course, you can subscribe on YouTube and leave comments. All right. With that, we'd like to bring out the master, Mr. James Gilliland from ECETI Ranch. So let's go to the phones.
Welcome to Books in Hindsight, the only podcast where hindsight is always 2020. And we explore the great books, works, and ideas of the century. Now, here's your host, teacher, and author, Matthew Hines.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Books in Hindsight. As I promised you, I have James Gilliland from the ECETI Ranch. Now, if you're not up to speed on the ECETI Ranch, and that is spelled ECETI Ranch, then I encourage you to look at the various YouTube videos that are available on the internet, YouTube, etc. But today we're not going to talk so much about the ranch, at least at the beginning. Today, we want to talk about James Gilliland, the author. Now, James has written a number of books that we're going to talk about today, but we're going to talk about those books and how his work with extraterrestrials and his work on the ranch and his work as a healer has affected the writing of those books. And we're also going to talk about the process of those books. So if you're here to look at the ECETI Ranch and spaceships and all that, this is probably not the interview or the podcast that you want to listen to. So right now I want to welcome James Gilliland. Welcome to Books in Hindsight.
All right. Thanks for having me on the show.
And thanks for being on the show, James. Now, are you at the ranch right now?
Yeah, I'm actually looking at Mount Adams right now with nice big snowflakes coming down at the moment.
Oh, it must be beautiful. I am so jealous. I am up in Redmond, Washington, and I guarantee you it is a completely different scene. So, James, thank you so much for being on Books in Hindsight. You are just an amazing individual, and I really cannot wait to get going into asking you questions. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to ask you about you first wrote your book, at least on Amazon. I saw 1998. So what was the first book for? When was it published? And how did that affect your later publishing experiences?
Well, the first book I wrote was Reunion with Source, and then Becoming Gods came right after that. And they're written about the same time. 82 was when I first published them, and they were spiral bound. And I self-published and very self-published. It was just a spiral-bound notebook. And I was selling them like crazy because I was teaching self-mastery classes, inner sensitivity classes. And just by word of mouth, these were going out. And I was doing really well with it. And then I decided to go with a publisher, and that goes, you end up getting 10% or not even that, or 8%, and they expect you to go everywhere, travel everywhere, and promote it. And that didn't go anywhere. And even the percentage that I was given, they ended up taking off. They closed the company and they ran off and bought a ranch with that money. So then I went with another publisher, and the same thing happened. And I said, my God, this is crazy. I'm doing all the work. I'm doing all the legwork, the promotion, everything. I don't understand what these guys are doing here, and to get this out. And then so I kind of wised up after that. And then I went into self-publishing, and I got a really good printer. And so I, had them all reorganized and, set up for a book with a really nice cover and everything. And I started printing those, and it just started taking off like crazy. The books kind of had a life of their own, and now all of them are bestsellers. All 4 books are bestsellers now. They're selling really good, and they're on everywhere. Amazon, anywhere, lulu.com. You can go anywhere to get the books now.
Yeah, I saw that you are doing quite well on Amazon, and congratulations on that, James. So the first book that you wrote Becoming Gods, A Reunion with Source. That's correct, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so and that did you say that came out in 1982 the first time?
Yeah, the first printings were in 1982.
Okay, so and that was your spiral edition and all that. So basically, you had to wait for changes in the publishing world in order for you to really kind of get your word out. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. And then the second book also had a lot of prophecies in it, and they were actually dated. And so the guy told me, the publisher said, don't put out dated material, it'll kill you, and everything else. The problem was the dates were accurate, and I wish he would have left them in. But I have the original book, and the dates are in there. But it talked about all the major earthquakes and the storms and the expanding sun that we're going through, and the earth changes and things of that nature. And it talked about the global elite and their program, where they were going to go with it, and their eventual end, basically.
Okay, so then can you just explain to me very quickly, the title of the book is Becoming Gods. Who is this? This is not a self-enlightenment book. Who is becoming gods in that book?
Well, here's the deal. The first book was Becoming Gods, and nobody would talk about it. Nobody would buy it. And so I had to change the name of the first book to Reunion with Source. And it was about my journey, my near-death experiences, studying with yogis and lamas and people for 30 years, and, taking every process-oriented therapy you could think of. It covers that whole journey to connect back in with the source, to make my own personal God connection. And when I say becoming gods or reunion with source, what I'm talking about is the one consciousness that encompasses all consciousness on all planes and dimensions, throughout the multiverse. And the access point is through the soul and through the heart, and that your soul, it sits right next to your heart. There's a little space there, and your soul's connected to the source. And it talks about our multidimensional selves. Basically, we have all these different levels to ourselves, all the way back to the source. So it covers that. A lot of people think that, you're becoming gods, you're going to be this Lord God over everyone, but they don't realize on the higher dimensions, you're in full service mode. You never overpower or control anything. You're just in full service mode to help things evolve to the highest potential. So we have to reinvent the image of God, and that's what I was doing in the books. Because when I had my own near-death experience, I went into the plane of bliss, the golden white light, and it was just pure unconditional love and joy and bliss. It didn't have an ego. It wasn't a male. It wasn't a guy with a beard and a book, taking notes. It was so far beyond any of that. So we have to get past the old images. And I mean, this is jumping way ahead, but almost all of our old images of bearded gods go back to the Anunnaki and the Egyptian gods, the Greek gods, and all those guys were very advanced beings that came here and passed themselves off as as gods or God, but there is, whatever you want to call it, a supreme intelligence, an omnipresent creator. There's something beyond them. So whenever you have an image or a being, you know, or an identity, you have a lesser form, you might say, and they do exist.
Okay, and for anybody who might be listening to this podcast who has some kind of doubt about what James is saying, he actually communicates with these beings on an almost daily basis, at least during the summer. So he does have a lot of actual credibility, and probably more than most. And so the next thing that I want to talk about is you're talking about basically like a Buddhist concept of God. Is that correct?
It's more of my own experience. But what I found out is that my own experience fits into some of the teachings. I think the Buddhist teachings are probably the closest out of any main teaching. But if you go into the you know, you look at the the Gospel of Thomas and things like that, or the true teachings of Jesus, they totally align with the teachings of Buddha and the other great masters. So what happened is the religions changed and altered, and a lot of the ancient texts and books and things to match their desires, you know. And so you know, we all know the Bible's been altered many times, and it came from at least 35 books originally. And then the King James Version is a big condensation of that. And then the Council of Constantinople, they took out all the references to past lives and things like that. They left some in. I had one person say, you know, as soon as you get into past lives, you lose me, because that's not the teachings of Jesus. And I said, really? I go, Jesus said that John is Elijah who was to come. I said, how can that not be a past life? He's Elijah, this ancient prophet that reincarnated as John. And he said, no one has come from heaven than he has come. Nobody has gone to heaven. He has come from heaven, even the Son of Man. So he's talking about you go back and forth, you know. And if you get the Bible with the Apocrypha, you know, Archangel Michael, I believe, in there talks all about reincarnation, and they took all the female prophets out and things like that. So it's, you know, you really have to get the you know, Bible with the Apocrypha as a beginning. But I also researched other texts, and I found out they all intertwine with each other.
Okay, James. Well, this is where I want to jump in there, because I have to do this. Now, you're talking about, you've done a lot of research, and the things that you're talking about, like the concept of God. Okay, so I wrote a book that, you know, where I talk about how there's really no more miracles, because we now we understand physics, and we understand dimensions, and we understand how an extraterrestrial being might be able to cross and communicate with us. So I kind of point out that it's not really a big mystery anymore. And so when you talk about God being, you know, God was basically somebody that, a concept that everybody could understand at the time, because if you got too far out, then nobody's going to accept it, and you're going to be wearing rocks around your head quite quickly. So I understand that. So this is all contained in Becoming Gods, correct? Your first
yeah,
book?
both books, Reunion with Source and Becoming Gods, and it's from firsthand experience. Basically, it's what happened is I had my own experience and my own near-death experiences. I had one at 5 years old, where I was dying of bronchial pneumonia, and actually Mary appeared to me, and I wasn't Catholic, you know. So she's a universal being, and she actually pulled me through it. And I kept asking who she was, you know, who was the woman in blue that kept coming to me and stroking my head and talking to me. And all the nurses wore green. So they said, you're just hallucinating. I said, no, I wasn't. That was real. And so that was my first experience. And the next one, I drowned and went through the tunnel, and went through a whole different levels and ended up in the plane of bliss. Okay. And there's even levels. I found out there's even levels beyond that, you know. So I don't think we can capsulize God. We definitely can't do it in our own minds, in the intellect. We can't do it in a book. It's so far beyond any of that. And I always tell people I figured it all out. Finally, after all these years, I figured it out. It all fits perfect into the great mystery, and just leave it there. But it's just so expanded. We can't even wrap our heads around it.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Because yes, we are very limited beings. So what was were you on the ranch? Okay. So 82, you weren't on the ranch then. Is that correct?
86, I came to the ranch.
86. Okay. So I want to ask you, what was the correlation between your writing your books and the ranch? Because you wrote your Becoming God's, the first reunion with Source. That's based on a near-death experience. Your part 2, the intermediate mind, that was written also about your near-death experience.
Yeah, the ultimate soul journey. Well, there was Reunion with Source, Becoming God's, the ultimate soul journey, and then the last one was the Anunnaki Return.
Okay.
And those are the 4 books. And so in the 70s is when I had the drowning, and mid 70s. And that was down right next to the wedge down there in Little Corona. And we were out body surfing, and there was, 6 to 8 foot waves. It wasn't that big. And I was, on the swim team and captain the water polo team, all that stuff. I thought I was bulletproof, and I got humbled really quickly because like 17 to 25 foot waves came in and just pummeled me, and held me under forever. And then that's where I went through. When I finally woke up, somebody grabbed me by the arm and pulled me on the beach, and I was laying there in a puddle of water, passed out, and then I came to. But it was quite an experience. I went through the tunnel everybody talks about. I saw all these levels, and something inside of me, like an inner spiritual program, said, don't stop. Don't stop to talk, just go for that golden white light. And that's what I did. And a lot of people say, don't go to the light. It's bad. It's a trap. It's not a trap. That's somebody else's program. Somebody said, go to the brown light. I don't even know what that is, but I keep hearing all these stories. But, you go, any master teacher will tell you that. Go for the bliss, go for the feeling and the light.
Yeah,
is when you cross over, and
that's, I don't want to go for the red light.
Yeah. The red light's more in the astral level. That's kind of playing around there. But but I went through the astral level, through the 5th, 6th, and into the 7th dimension, which was just pure bliss. It was just, and what's weird there is you're unique but one at the same time, which is kind of a paradox, but you're unique because you're a light being and you're still conscious, you still have an identity, but at the same time you're one with the source, with this greater consciousness and energy that surrounds you. And I was having a conversation back and forth with it while I was there.
All right. So you were in your near-death experience. Were you told to do anything, or you just came back? And were you given any instructions? Go to Washington State and get on the ECETI Ranch and write some books?
No, basically what happened was the first thing I said was, how can I stay? And it was a thought-to-thought transmission. It came back to me and it said, I never told one of my children when to come or go. That's free will. And I'm going, wait a second, this isn't the program I was taught, And then I said, how can I earn the right to stay? And it came back to me and it says, you cannot earn what is given freely and unconditionally, So I have to totally reorganize my thought process on what God is when I'm getting this information. And then the last thing was, I said, how can I serve? I was so grateful. I was so just blown away by the pure love and the joy and the bliss of that plane. And I said, how can I serve? And I didn't hear an answer for a long time. I was waiting for the list, and the list was, go tell Bobby Sue, her husband with us, her dog's in heaven too. And, I was waiting for the big list, no list. And so finally it came back to me and says, what do you want to do? What brings you joy? And I said, I'd like to come back to earth and teach people about the true nature of God, our creator, that, we have all these images of these wrathful gods and all this tyranny in the past and genocidal crazy stuff. We need to clean this up. And so I came back to actually teach people about the true nature of God and what's on the different planes and dimensions and what I experienced. And ever since that happened, I've been able to go back and forth. I can go up and down the continuum. I call it the vibration continuum, and go to the other planes and dimensions. And I have constant access and information coming to me.
Oh, okay. That's not fair at all, because you're really loading your answers with like 40 other questions that we don't have time to ask. So you wanted to come back and just basically teach people and help people. Now, did that just I assume you weren't like a trust fund baby or anything. No. I mean, you had to somehow like buy things and somehow find a way to get your ranch. So did the universe work for you?
Well, it's a combination of things. Before I had the near-death experience, I was actually doing commercial real estate, and I had my own office, and I had people working for me and everything. And I bought some property through that process, and then I kept switching out properties. I'd buy another piece and clean it up and sell it and over double my price. And I kept doing that until I got enough funds for the ranch here. And that's basically how I got to this process, because I do carpentry and everything else and know how to remodel houses and things. And so I was doing that work with the intention of actually building a healing center.
Okay, so James, you went to the ranch in 1986, correct?
Yes.
And you, I guess you'd missed the Mount St. Helens freak show. So, and so you came on Washington just before the boom. So you came and you probably got settled down. It was fairly quiet. So you went from, I can't even do the math, I guess 20 years, because I'm 2000, no, it's almost 30 years. Because you did your first books, your Becoming God's books, and then in 2016 you did, at least on Amazon, Becoming God's, Anunnaki Return, and your reunion with Source. That 3 books in the same year, correct?
Yeah. Well, no. Yeah, I wrote Reunion with Source and Becoming God's in time kind of between 82 and 84.
Okay.
And then
but we don't have to rehash all that about, because yes, we understand it's about your real near-death experiences and you're trying to teach people about the nature of God and all that. So I don't want to make you go back over that. But all right, so let's talk about the Anunnaki Return. For anybody who doesn't know who the Anunnaki is, they are a group of beings that came from live on another planet, I guess in our solar system, that were responsible for maybe us and our civilization. And beyond that, I'm going to let James tell you about who they are and why they might be returning.
Okay, so there's a lot of misinformation about the Anunnaki, and I heard all these terror stories and everything about them and this and that, and I was trying to figure out what's true. And then about a couple of years ago, about 3 years ago, actually, one of them actually appeared. And I was just getting ready to give a talk at Contact in the Desert. And I was in one of they're really nice to me at Contact in the Desert. They always gave me a little studio at the very end of the compound out all by myself. And I said, thank you, that I really need that. And so I'm sitting out there meditating. And all of a sudden, this woman appears, and she's about between 8'3" and 8'6", very tall, beautiful goddess looking. She looked kind of like Cameron Diaz, basically, with a headdress. And their heads are different than ours. They have more of a cone head, kind of very beautiful being, and just emanating love, just profound love. And all I could say to her when I saw her was like, yes, ma'am, what can I do for you? I was very humbled by it. And she said, there's a different story, and they don't have the whole story. They don't. And she said, we're coming back to right or wrong to straighten this out. And people need to hear the whole story. And so she started telling me what really happened in the past and how a lot of the fall of humanity, there was ups and downs before that, but Marduk, who was one of the sons, I believe, of Enlil, I'm not sure, he fell. And he made a pact with the reptilians to have total supremacy over the earth. And he warred on his own people, everybody. He just went really bad, And so that's the image that we have. We have, some people say the Anunnaki are reptilians. They're not reptilians. They're the bearded gods. They're very tall. They have beards, usually light hair, red hair, blonde hair, sometimes silver. They usually have blue or green eyes, very tall, and they're from ancient Lyra. And that's where they originated. Almost most of humanity originated from ancient Lyra. And so there's a whole different story. So what happened was they had a split, a division, and a lot of them left and continued to evolve. And the ones that stayed behind were the rebellion, the ones that they fell because they fell into the turf wars and the conquering and the separation game. And so they fell. And the other ones continued to go. And they took a lot of humans with them, actually, a lot of hybrids that were part Anunnaki and part of the human experiment that was going on here as well. So they left and they continued to evolve. And now they're returning to help clean up the mess. And we've been under draconian law ever since Marduk. We've had this draconian grid here, and it's been really holding people down. I think that's mine. I don't know, somebody's. But they've been holding, people down, and it's a very controlling program. And now that's being shattered. It's being torn down. That grid is being torn down by the benevolent beings. And that includes what people would call the ascended masters or angelic beings, spiritually and technologically advanced off-worlders, Pleiadians, Andromedans, the Orion Counts of Light, Nectarians, all of those are involved in this, Syrians. And then it's all these other dimensions are pressing hard on the earth right now. They're pressing in, and they're tearing down this old grid and bringing what I call universal law into the picture. And universal law is very simple. It's basically universal peace and brother, sister love and individual freedom and prosperity for everybody. Well, that consciousness is pressing hard on the planet, and everything that doesn't resonate with it is coming up. And all the old wounds and traumas around that are surfacing for people to heal. And a lot of people are going to be projecting and blaming and acting it out. And some people are going to take responsibility, own it, and heal it, and ascend, and go to the next level.
Okay, so once again, we have to go all the way back. Okay, so this 8-foot tall Anunnaki woman, you're at a conference, and she shows up in your room. Does she tell you what to write in the Anunnaki Return? Is that about what you're just talking about here, or did she tell you? Is there something else in the book that she told you?
There's a whole bunch of information in there, and she filled in the blanks in a lot of areas where I didn't have the understandings I needed about the real history of Earth. And what was really interesting, I went to Australia, and I was hanging out with the Brendan Murray. He's the chief of the Raven tribe, and several others, and Peter Slattery. And we're going to all these ancient sites, and the whole history of Earth is written in stone in these sites, and it tells the exact story that she told me. And so when I looked at that, it showed these ships come in, they came down and landed, and then it shows a primitive man, and then it shows DNA that they added their DNA to the primitive man, and it goes on. And it talks about a fall, and then the next one were the Pleiadians that came in, and they started Atlantis and Lemuria, and they fell. And then the Egyptians returned to Australia to try to get the knowledge. They lost the knowledge. They fell. They lost the knowledge. They returned. 2 pharaohs returned, and And they tried to steal the knowledge and take it back. And the elders there said, no, you can't steal it. It needs to remain here. And one of them got bit by a snake and died right there. And then the other one shipwrecked and died. So the knowledge is still there. And this was upsets a lot of people, is that the origin was actually Australia, not Africa. Mm-hmm. Everything began in Australia. Now, the pharaohs and their breastplates, the gold and the breastplates, everything came from Ballarat in Australia. They can track gold and find out exactly where it came from. There's ways to doing that. So they're finding out now that all the pharaohs' gold and their breastplates and all that stuff actually came from Australia. And the genome experiment shows we all have Aboriginal genes in us. All of us do. And so it tracks back to the Aboriginal, which is the original human that they started tinkering with. And it was actually a Denisovian man, is what they called it, was the one they were tinkering with to create the half and half, or whatever you might call it.
Okay, so the Anunnaki came, and because I've always thought that it was, and I don't really want to go off into this tangent, but I always thought that it was kind of a more gradual process of manipulate the monkey into a, this and that and the other, until you finally come up with a Homo sapien. But what is the time period here? It has to be like millions of years, right?
Yeah, it's minimum of about 600,000 years.
Okay, and so the woman that came and talked to you, this Anunnaki woman, she didn't like, because we see the pictures, the things from Samaria where they have the long beards. I assume she didn't have a long beard because you said she was beautiful, 8 foot tall and beautiful. So that'd be kind of interesting, and you probably thought you were in Vegas for a few minutes, but anyway, so this Marduk basically sold us out to the reptilians, and she came to tell you that is not the case, that we're not under the thumb of the reptilians, correct?
Well, yeah, they came back because they kind of have a karmic duty to right that wrong that happened back then. And so they left. They were gone for a long time, and they're just now returning. And the problem with Earth is we're at the outermost corner of the Milky Way. We're out in the boondocks, and we've been left to just kind of fend for our own for so long. And we've been preyed upon by some other technologically advanced beings, but spiritually backwards. And it's just been a big mess here for quite some time. And now originally it was created to become an Eden where everything would evolve to its highest potential. That was the original design. And the Pleiadians were working within that design. And then, it fell. They had the war between Atlantis and Lemuria, and the scientists went off and started using technology to control and power over others, which we're doing today again. And it's the same old mindset going on. Is there's a split, and there's a split between those who are aligned with the universal law, which I talked about earlier, or the law of one. Everybody has different names for it. And those who worship science and technology and power over others. And we have the same thing happening today, the exact same thing. You have those who want to serve humanity. They want to clean up the planet and restore everything. And you've got those that want to control and dominate, and they're into their own sense gratification and material wealth and fame or whatever. So it's the same old program running.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate because I hear you talk about when you're referring to the ships coming in, that you're not a nuts and bolts guy, and I am a nuts and bolts guy. I like to know how those things work, and I know a lot of people do, but we're also dealing with beings. So you're seeing a lot of interdimensional beings. Now, is this woman, did she have a name? I don't want to keep calling her the eighth from it. What was it?
Enha.
Enha?
Yeah, ENHA.
Okay, so Enha, she's not a flesh and blood woman. She is interdimensional?
Yeah, she's about six. I think she's 6-dimensional being.
And so are the Anunnaki coming back? I mean, do they need to fly around in spaceships? And
No.
are these the people that you're seeing down at Mount Adams?
No, that's a different group.
Okay.
Mount Adams, there's actually a base inside of Mount Adams. And going back to the nuts and bolts, we do have the nuts and bolts stuff going on here. And a lot of back engineered stuff flies over here, and they try to play games with us. And we see that too. So, but these ships that we're filming are mainly energy or light ships, and they can morph into 3 or 4 ships. And some ships are actually a being. They're actually a Merkaba. We've had a lot of remote viewers come up here and check it out. John Vivanco comes here quite often, and he was remote viewing it. And he goes, these beings, he goes, I don't understand. All my remote viewers are drawing humans with cat heads and feline beings, and the ships aren't really physical. And I said, yeah, they're Merkabas. And I said, these are fifth, 6th, and 7th dimensional beings, the felines. So they're flying around in different types of vehicles, and it validated all they were getting in their remote viewing as well. So those are the Syrian beings. That's mainly we're seeing 5th dimensional Syrian beings that are feline. They're humanoid feline, and they're all throughout the history. You know, Narshringa, they talk India. Sekhmet are the lion beings that were in Egypt. You know, Narisha is a lion being that protects the gods. There's all records of ancient history of these beings.
Well, I'd actually seen a thing on the Face on Mars. I'm sure you've seen it, where they had redone it, and with computer graphics, and it was actually it was half feline.
Yeah,
I don't know if you'd actually seen that. So, yeah,
and so just here too as well. I have them appear all the time here. We work a lot with them, but it's a whole consortium of beings that are coming to the Earth right now to help get us through this shift.
Okay, so James, I need to, because it's so tempting to run off and talk about these other things. I really want to talk about remote viewing, but I want to really try to stay focused on your books, because this is one of the reasons I wrote a book about my take on history. And the reason I wrote it is because I don't like to sit and talk to people and have to teach them the same thing and say, because now I can say, would you just read my book and then come back and talk to me? Do you ever find yourself, because you are like I don't want to say a prophet, but I'm sure people come to you every day. They need answers to, why won't my car start? Where's my kitten, and things that you just have no idea. So do you ever just say, just read my books?
Yeah. Well, I do that because, like you're saying, that's one of the reasons I wrote the books. 2 reasons. One, in reunion with Source, I cover all the ancient history and the misinformation in the Bibles and things like that, especially Ezekiel and this kind of goes off a little bit, but if you read Ezekiel, there's a shiny disc comes out of the firmament. It has bronze feet like calves. It has fire and brimstone coming out from underneath it. And when it lands, it sounds like 1,000 rushing rivers. And some guy they call God steps out of it, along with wheels within wheels, cherubim flashing lights all around them. And then he proceeds and he orders 6 men with their shattering weapons to destroy all the men and women in the city of Israel. And you're going, well, wait a second. That doesn't sound like God. That sounds like some high-tech tyrant with a ship and technology. How can 6 men destroy a whole city? And what kind of weapons, are they carrying? And then he orders a man all dressed in a white garment, white linen, they said, to reach in the bowels of the cherubim and spread hot coals around the city. And he said, henceforth, anybody who comes here will die a hideous death. Their hair and fingernails will fall out, and there'll be food for the raven and the beast. That's radiation, obviously. So our images of God and that experience is where we got the image of the wrathful God. And it even goes back to the Anunnaki, where we have Enki, which was the creator god that loved his creations and wanted them to continue. And Enlil was the general who wanted the experiment to end, and he wanted to clean house and get rid of everybody. He thought we were noisy and nasty creatures. So anyway, people have these images stuck in their head, And the main reason I came back was to dispel those images, to say, look, we have a history. You need to understand the history. You need to understand the origin of man, the real history. And you need to understand the nature of God, because the images that you've been given are all control factors, and they've been used to control you and manipulate you, and people being go-betweens, so you can't make your own personal connection with source. And so that's kind of what I came back to do that, but then it just kept expanding from there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you are doing a great job of it. I mean, if you Google James, he is all over the place on the internet and on YouTube, and yeah, you're just an amazing character. But going back to what you're talking about, one of the things that I see is that you're talking about a translation problem, first of all.
Yeah.
People, when they translated from Greek to, Aramaic and to Latin and whatever, there's just not the technology there, and so hence not the vocabulary. And that's a big thing. And then there's another supposition that is anybody that is more advanced than us is immediately God.
Yeah, exactly.
And but there could be there's obviously very many tiers of people that are above us that before you reach what you call that oneness. So I think that's your job, is to just explain to people, it's really a translation problem, and we just don't have the understanding before that we have now. So James, I would like to talk a little bit to you now, because we've talked about your books, and I'm so curious about some things that happened at the ranch. And since you agreed to the interview, I'd like to talk a little bit about your like when people come to you, do you feel like is it draining for you, or do you still enjoy it after all these years?
Well, it's kind of interesting. I've learned to set boundaries over the years. I would just give everything away and try to help everybody that I could. And now I'm seeing that I have to set boundaries, and I'm getting pretty good at that. For a while there, I was doing like 9 counselings a day, and that's just way too much for the kind of work that I do. Yeah, and it almost took me out, and so I realized if I don't take care of myself, I'm no good to others. So I had to change that focus, but I'm really reevaluating all of that, because I got into some major health problems because I was so drained. I was and also too under attack by the dark forces at the same time. So you really got to keep your energies up. But I'm kind of reevaluating all that right now, and my whole focus is not to be a guru. I'm here to empower people to make their own connection and get their own information. I teach them how to do that. And so if somebody's really in trouble, I'll help them and step in. But I don't want to make this a McDonald's, the golden arches where you drive through and you get everything done for you. That's not what it's about. It's about empowering people and giving them the tools and techniques to keep their own energy fields clear and gain their own wisdom and access. And, and the books and the DVDs and everything else are just to help empower people, just to validate people's own experiences, things of that nature.
Yeah, James, let me do this very quickly. James' books, from Becoming Gods, The Anunnaki Return, Reunion with Source, are all available on Amazon. They're available on Barnes & Noble's Nook. They're on iTunes, and also available at booksinhindsight.com and hindsight.com. I have the links where you can get James' books. Okay, James, so going back to that thing where you said that you're being besieged by these dark forces, I mean, you're basically, you talk about an enlightened contact, right? Mm-hmm. And so are you the one doing the contact?
There's quite a few of us that are having contact here. And,
okay.
And,
when you say it's I'm sorry, James, go ahead.
Well, it kind of, what happened is when I first came here, I was creating a healing center, and I was setting up process-oriented therapies and focusing on living a life as a template and showing people how you can live a spiritual life, in in harmony with nature and growing our own food and everything else. That was my main thing, create a template and offer process-oriented therapy. My brother does deep tissue work and massage work, and other people were doing, work around food and things like that. And that was my main focus. And one day I was doing an all-day meditation, and they came to me, the Pleiadians came to me, started talking to me, and I asked them, where are you coming from? And they said, we're on the 5th and 6th dimension. And I said, really? And I said, actually, we're coming from a ship. And I thought I was losing it. And I said, this is overactive imagination. I'm going nuts. I'm quitting. And I got up, and I didn't even make it to the front door. And my sister and her friends came running up and yelling, asked me if I saw it. And I said, see what? And they said, there's a huge light ship hovering right over the building here, the main lodge here. So that's how it started. And then so I said, I have to expand my horizons here. And after the near-death experience, I didn't want to talk to anybody except for like Mary or Jesus. Everybody else were spooks to me.
Wow, what an amazing first part of the interview. Please don't go away. Part 2 will be coming up shortly. If you are on YouTube and wherever you're listening to, please look for part 2 of the amazing James Gilliland interview. All right, we'll see you at the next interview.
This has been Books in Hindsight with your host, Matthew Hines. Please join us for our next podcast and look for our archives on iTunes and go to thehindsight.com. That's HEINES site.com for great books by Matthew Hines and other great authors.